Hey guys, welcome to the Nine-Sided Circle for March 1st, 2020. We're going to be talking about, well, first of all, I should introduce myself, right?
Yeah.
I'm Noor Kyle, and this is my co-host.
Mushtaq Ali.
And, oh, more people. Zoha.
Yeah. So we're going to be talking about the secret history of the Enneagram today. And this is going to be kind of a fun thing, I hope. And it will include some legend, some mythology, and some history. We can only trace the history of the Enneagram back to about 2,500 years ago, 500 BC. But before that, we have stories, and they're nice stories. And in a big sense, they're the stories of math.
Numbers, yeah.
Numbers, yes. So before we start, let's welcome Zainab and Zoha.
And Dave's back.
And Dave's back.
And Ilmar's here.
And Ilmar's here. All of our favorite people are starting to stack up. And the mysterious iPhone person. That's not going to drive me crazy.
All right, so
anyway. So the first thing anybody in the West knew about the Enneagram was at the turn of the 20th century when this rascal showed up in St. Petersburg, Russia, by the name of George Ivanovich Gurdjieff. And he showed up there and started teaching. He came from the East, from the Caucasus region. He probably grew up around Tashkent, which is now in Uzbekistan. And he spent his early life running around trying to figure out what the heck was going on. And he came and he introduced a form of teaching that was basically unknown at the time. It was not Kabbalistic. It was not theosophical. It was not ascended masters. It was not any of this stuff. It was a whole new way of being, or at least it seemed so. And one of the things that he introduced was that symbol.
This one.
Yeah, or that one. This nine-sided thing called the Enneagram, which he said was a universal hieroglyph that contained all of the truth of the world, which is a pretty bold statement. And he taught his students how to use it. Interestingly, there was nothing said about personality profiles. Mr. Gurdjieff would have totally rejected the idea that the Enneagram had anything to do with personality typing. That came much, much, much later. Which is not to say that it's not useful. It's just it is a side branch of the device. So according to Mr. Gurdjieff, the Enneagram is a pre-electronic computer for computing process. Any process. If you can think of a process, you can lay it out on the Enneagram.
How would you define process?
Process is a series of actions that take you from a start to finish, ideally with a goal. Does this make sense?
Yeah.
Whoops, hit the wrong thing. There we are. Okay, so he suggested, Gurdjieff suggested, that this Enneagram was something that belonged to an ancient brotherhood, and that it contained serious teachings. Now,
what do you want to do now?
I'm trying to figure out best ways to describe. We all know, if you have been listening to any of our casts or done any of our classes, you know that the Enneagram is made up of two laws, the law of 3 and the octave, or the law of 7.
So
the
law of 3.
The law of 3
is this triangle
this
thing
triangle
here.
thingy in there.
And if you're listening to this on a podcast rather than watching the video, you can just take a look at our logo. Our logo is the picture that we're talking about, because that is the symbol of the Enneagram.
Yes.
And then the law of 7.
The law of 7 has to do with those 6 points around. Why 6 rather than 7? We'll get to that. Somebody disappeared again.
Well, that's okay. We'll just invite them back.
Yeah, when they show back.
So that's the law with the 6 points.
Yeah. Now, this symbol does not appear anywhere before Gurdjieff. Not that I've found, and I've been looking since the 1960s to see if I could find any reference to it before Gurdjieff. And the answer is, as far as I can tell, no. This symbol originated either with him or the person or people who taught him this. Before this, there was another symbol. And that was the symbol used for the Enneagram, and it was called a tetrachus. Tetra, 4, trachus means a symbol, or the tetrachus of the decad, the fourfold symbol of the 10. And that goes all the way back to Pythagoras and his school, the semicircle, 2,500 years ago. This symbol was so important to the Pythagoreans that they swore oaths by it. They made prayers to it. As a matter of fact, let me read you "Bless us, divine number, thou who generated gods and men, O holy tetrachus." Tetrachus. I can't say the word.
Tetrachus? I think
Tetrachus, yes.
That's what it looks like, yeah.
"Thou that containest the root and source of the eternally flowing creation. For the divine number begins with the profound, pure unity until it comes to the holy 4. Then it begets the mother of all, the all-comprising, all-bounding, the firstborn, the never-swerving, the never-tiring holy 10, the key holder of all." So that,
cut and paste it into the chat.
I can cut this and paste this into the chat.
So this was a prayer said by the Pythagoreans to this symbol.
To this symbol, yes.
The tetrachus.
Yeah. There we go. So, what is this symbol, and how did Pythagoras come up with it, and why was it so important? To understand that, we have to go back even further, back to the origins of Western mathematics. Who knows what the origins of Western mathematics were? I'll give you a hint. It wasn't the Egyptians.
The Babylonians?
Even before them, but you're on the right track. The Sumerians came before the Babylonians. The Babylonians got their math.
Dave.
Dave, yes.
Thanks, Dave. Yep. Dave has
Dave,
suggested
yeah.
Sumeria. Yep.
10 points to Gryffindor. So, yeah, Babylonia, the Babylonians, the Akkadians all got their math and most of their religion from the Sumerians. The Sumerians had a weird math. It was a sexagesimal math. It was not a true base 60, but the way it worked is that you would have how to describe it best. You would have 6 tens. It was a 10 over 6 math. So you would write like 1 through 10, and then on until you got to 60, and then you would start over again. Using a delimitator to, usually it was a space, but a way to say, okay, here's this group of 60 and here is this group of 60. And so you had tens within the 60. So you would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then you would do 11, 12, 13, 14, etc. until you got to 60, and then you would switch. Now, many, many things, mathematical and numbered, come from Sumeria, including the concept of the dozen. Dozen goes all the way back to there. The concept of the 12 hours of the day and the 12 hours of the night as a way to divide up the day and the night go back to Sumeria. One of the most important things that goes all the way back to Sumeria is the circle, and dividing the circle into 360 degrees. We still use that today. 4,000 some odd years later, we're still dividing our circles into 360 degrees.
Plus 60 minutes.
Plus 60 minutes,
60
seconds. Yeah, all of that is all part of the old Sumerian math system. And this isn't even woo-woo stuff. You can look this up. So here's a weird thing about a circle of 360 degrees. Let's divide it. So if you divided 360 by 0, your head explodes. If you divide it by 1, you get 360, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you divide 360 by 2, you get 180. If you divide it by 3, you get 120. If you divide it by 4, you get 90, which is why you have 90 degrees for right angles. If you divide it by 5, you get 72. If you divide it by 6, you get 60. And this, the Sumerians really liked dividing the circle by 6. That was like very, very groovy for them. If you divide it by 7, you get 51.428571, 428571, 428571, 428571. A reoccurring decimal that goes off into infinity. I'll come back to that. If you divide it by 8, you get 45. If you divide it by 9, you get 40. If you divide it by 10, you get 36.
And so on.
And so on. But 7 of the simple numbers, 1 through 9, 7 is the only one that does not divide into 360 evenly. And the decimal that we get is very, very interesting. Listen to it again, 514. Now, where have we seen this before? If I drop the 5, I get 142857. 142857, 142857. And we all know what that is, right? You don't. Oh, there are some people who don't know this. That is the moving lines of the Enneagram. They are numbered 1, 4,
So that's
2. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you do it.
I'll do my best. Okay,
Do
let's
your
see.
best. So put it on 1.
1.
1, 4.
No.
You can do it.
4.
4, 2,
2.
8. 8 is over your head, directly over your head, sort of. 8. Now down to 5. 5
Yeah,
is down by
down
your ear.
by
Yeah,
my ear.
by your ear. And then up to 7, over the top of your head again.
Yep.
There you go.
There.
7, and then back to 1.
And then you follow that line straight back to 1 up there.
Yes.
Yep.
So the numbering sequence on the Enneagram, in the Enneagram for the moving lines is this weird decimal that has basically no end to it, that is infinite, an infinite reoccurring decimal, which is different than an irrational number. If it was an irrational number, the Pythagoreans would not have touched it. They were afraid of 2 things, irrational numbers and 0.
Spooky zeros.
Spooky zeros. I know that some Pythagoreans actually killed a guy for letting out knowledge of irrational numbers, specifically of pi.
Serious business, these
Serious
numbers.
business, yes.
Mm.
Yeah. So, this is where it all starts, folks. This is where the sequence that becomes the Enneagram started, is with this understanding of dividing 360 by 7, and it generates this weirdness. Now, we know that 7 is the note of the traditional octave, right? You have 7 notes, and then you have the octave, the 8th note, which is a doubling of the first. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. You do it.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do.
Yeah, see? Now, do all but the last do.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si.
And we just leave it hanging there. You notice how weird that makes you feel?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, there's this sense
That's
of,
it.
okay, how about that next part? Yeah.
If you do that with some groups, and I've done this, and it was pretty amusing, there will be somebody in the audience that hits the last do just to resolve it.
Because we're all expecting to go there. We're all expecting
we
to
want
finish
to go there.
the whole set of sounds.
Yeah. So, if you know anything about Pythagoras, you know that he was really into music. You know that, right?
Well, we do now.
Yes. Pythagoras, music, big deal. So, three was important to the Sumerians for a number of reasons, half of a 6, and such like. By the way, if we can make room here, if you can lean back away from, I can't get further.
This is your fault.
You can't see it all.
All right.
Yeah,
so,
there's a very special tech practice behind us. So, Pythagoras took his teachings. Now, a little bit about Pythagoras. He was born in Samos, which was an island that is part of Ionia, which is an area of Greece. His mother was an Ionian Greek, and his father was from Tyre, which made him most probably a Phoenician. The Phoenicians are the descendants of the Babylonians that went out to the sea, who carried the same mathematical traditions with them. So, Pythagoras was pretty precocious. Even as a young person, he was interested in math and philosophy, and he studied under 2 very important Greek mathematicians, Thales and Anaximander, both of which suggested that he go to Egypt to further his studies. Now, this was at the end of the Old Kingdom, beginning of the Middle Kingdom, I think. And Egypt was not quite what it had used to been, but it was still a pretty interesting place. So Pythagoras, as a young man, goes there and studies. While he studying, Cambyses, the first or the second, one of those guys, son of Cyrus, the emperor of Persia. Persia took over that whole section from Iran all the way over to where Babylon was. It became part of the Persian Empire. And they invaded Egypt, and they defeated the Egyptians and took control of it. While they were doing that, they took Pythagoras captive. Now remember that Pythagoras' father was from Tyre, and he was a merchant, and very good merchant. And so Pythagoras probably used his family ties to keep himself from like getting his head chopped off or anything embarrassing like that. So instead, he was carried off to Persia, where, as his biographer tells us, he was introduced to a very mystical worship of the gods and initiated in all of the mysteries of the Magi, who were the inheritors of the Babylonians. Now, Pythagoras spoke both Greek and Chaldean. Chaldean is closely related to Aramaic. It's the local Semitic lingua franca that you find from Israel all the way up into Syria, at the time at least. So he was able to spend, I think it was 5 years as a guest of the Persians. He was not a prisoner in any sense that we understand it. He was basically an honored guest who figured he could pick up his studies there. After he came back, that's when he first started talking about the Tetractys. And so he most likely picked it up there, and he most likely picked it up from this tradition that came down from Sumer. And he most likely was introduced to the weirdness of 7 into 360. Any questions so far? I'm rambling. I know I'm rambling because why get all scholarly? We can just ramble.
Does 11 into 360 do anything interesting?
I don't know, but 11 is a double number, so we're only looking at the single digits.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the important part, is that numbers 1 through 9, the single digits, among those, 7 is the only one that has this crazy decimal.
Yeah, so at some point, we might sit down and do the division for a couple hundred numbers and see what happens, but that would hurt my head. But that was a good question. Other questions?
Any questions? Doesn't have to be. There are no dumb questions, let's put it that way.
Answers. Nope, then on we go. So let me show you how the Tetractys is built. This should be coming up Who can see this?
Got it.
It might be tiny for people who are
It's
on
going to be
phones.
tiny.
Yeah.
So I'm going to make it bigger. Voila. Everybody see this?
Yep.
Okay, this is the symbol. This is 10 dots arranged in a triangle. 4, 3, 2, and 1. And how this is built is very, very interesting. It's built like this. First, we take one equilateral triangle, and then we unfold this equilateral triangle in 3 space. This gives us 3 triangles. If we were to fold these together, we would get a tetrahedron, which also is an interesting shape. So folding it together means you bring the points together along the lines, and you get 3 sides and a bottom, all of which are equilateral triangles. So we then put 2 more triangles on top of this, and then 1 more triangle on top of that, so that we have 6 triangles. Now, the Sumerians and Babylonians understood that things that did with 6, base 6, had to do with the other world and all of this kind of stuff. Things that had to do with 10 had to do with the mundane world. So when they're working in their base 6 of their 60, this is this. And this relates to the law of 3 and the 6 energies that are developed from the law of 3. You may remember, hopefully, that the law of 3 is wholly affirming, wholly denying, and wholly reconciling. So the positive, the negative, and the neutral, and all like that. So here is this. Then make this bigger, and you just put dots at all of the corners of the triangles, and that gives you your 10 dots, and you make the triangles go away because you don't want people to understand how this was built. But we're not going to make the triangles go away. Instead, we are going to connect the 6 here. Actually, there's 7 when you count the center dot. But you'll notice when this is connected and this triangle is left, it forms a very interesting diagram, which is to say it forms a hexagon or a piece of honeycomb. Now you're understanding how the bees might be involved. So we take this and we expand the inner lines out so you can see it better. The green lines show you the connections here. And if we count this as 1.
We're in the top right corner.
Yeah, they can see my hand. You can all see the little hand up here, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So 1, 4, 2, 8, 5, 7, 1. And there is that weird thing again. These lines, I have never talked about these lines, I think, yet, or these lines or these lines. But we will soon, like when we do the Enneagram class. So here is how the Enneagram was understood before we had the Gurdjieffian symbol of the Enneagram. Now, if I come here, you can see the numbering system. So a member of the Pythagorean school or any outpart of it had to do to figure things out, figure out processes, was to draw 10 points in the ground. And they had the ability to figure out any process, how any process was going to go. We go a little bit further. This is for those of you who took the course on the six forces.
Yep.
Here are the six forces: affirming, denying, and reconciling. These are, of course, just the basic Greek letters: alpha, beta, gamma.
Gamma. Yep.
Yep. And here they are on the triangle, representing the fundamental law of three. Here are the six forces as they emerge from the law of three. Here we have affirming, denying, reconciling, reconciling, affirming, denying, denying, reconciling, affirming, etc., all the way around. So this is another way that you use this, is to go, what force is up right now? What forces are acting on me? And then we have this, which we will get to later.
Okay.
So I'm going to exit out, and we'll come back to that. So you all see how that worked, sort of, at least a little bit. Those of you who are clear on the Enneagram, who have taken the Enneagram courses, should be able to follow this without too much trouble. So we know from this that the Enneagram is, in fact, most probably at least 2,500 years old, and probably a lot older. And that the symbol that we use now is very, very new in comparison to what was used 2,500 years ago. It's a lot easier to use Gurdjieff's symbol than it is to use the Tetractys, just because it's easier to see the moving lines and that sort of thing.
Yep, it's a lot more obvious in some sense, rather than the triangle, which you kind of have to like infer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to imagine the moving lines. And that was the thing. Pythagoras, after he got back from Persia, went to Syracuse, I think it was, and don't hold me to that because I'm just pulling shit out of my memory, but I'm pretty sure it was Syracuse, and founded a school known as the Semicircle. The Semicircle was his mystical school, and it had both the inner students and the outer students. The outer students lived in their own homes, had jobs, all of that kind of stuff. And they would come during the day to the semicircle, and they would be taught by the inner students, who were known as the mathematicoi. The inner students lived at the semicircle. They took several important vows, and basically lived as a life in a monastery. There were both men and women involved in this, and as with this tradition from the beginning, men and women were held to be equal. This was very weird for the time, when women were basically reproductive devices. But at least amongst Pythagoras' school, as I understand it, this was not the case. And we do know that the Pythagoreans produced some very important mathematicians and philosophers who were women. The most interesting of which was Hypatia of Alexandria, which is somebody you should look up. Very, very interesting person. So if you could see, and I think what I am going to do here is go and pull up the image that is behind us. There we go. Because I want you to see this. And let me come back here and share this sucker with you.
So this is without us in the way.
This is without us in the way. We're hidden.
As you can see, there are lots of different symbols in each point of the tetractys.
Mm-hmm. Here we have the symbols for the 4 elements, for fire, water, earth, and air. Here we have salt, mercury, and sulfur. Here we have female and male, and here we have the sun at 1. This is another way that the tetractys was laid out later, from the Egyptian period onward, and especially into the alchemical periods of the 10th through the 15th century. You would find an arrangement like this that would tell you things.
Mushtaq.
Yes, I knew this would get your attention, Dave.
Why in this particular diagram is the salt, sulfur, mercury, and elements reversed in terms of how they appear in the alchemical diagrams normally?
Because this is done in the Semitic fashion where you read from right to left. Yeah, reading from left to right is not something that was universal. And amongst the Babylonians, the Arabs, the Hebrews, the Phoenicians, they most often wrote from right to left. So this is the oldest arrangement as opposed to the reverse.
Cool.
And for this, you know, we have the salt and the sulfur on the outside and the mercury in the center, which that suggests a triangle. So I would take this and I would push it up to here and I would get, you know, an equilateral triangle that tells you which is which.
So Mercury at the top.
Mercury at the top becomes the reconciling force. The sulfur is the affirming force, and the earth is, and the salt is the denying force, according to this. Male and female, binary, kind of makes sense, and it all comes from the one. So this symbol, this arrangement of 10 dots or 10 symbols has been around us a very, very long time. And the one thing that we do not understand, or we never as people understood, is that it is not used as a static image, but it should be a flow chart, basically.
Yep.
So.
And it's also bendy in the sense that, as you were showing with the Mercury, that becomes the top point of a triangle in and of itself.
Yep.
Or when we expand the inner hexagon, I mean, it's not just stuck in place where everything is static, as you said.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we're going to go and we're going to look at the Enneagram again, and I'm going to throw that up on the screen for us and make it big enough for people to see it. So this is an Enneagram that shows the crossing points.
So the red dots are, you know, the most numerous crossing points in the center. And then we have
the purple dots. And
those represent the 1, 4, 2,
8, 5,
8,
7
5,
with the
7.
hidden.
Yep.
The 12, the 7, the 3, and the 1. And there's a beautiful poem in the Sefer Yetzirah, which is one of the Kabbalistic texts, that speaks exactly to this. But we understand that this can be used to lay out a process. And the one that I've always used with you guys, because it was the first one that I learned from Mr. Bennett, the student of Mr. Gurdjieff, is the Enneagram of the kitchen at 1 here. But we're actually going to go back. And we're going to go to here and make this so you can see the relationships. 1, the kitchen ready for work. Most of you have heard this before. 2, the kitchen at work. 3, food enters. 4, food is prepared. 5, food is cooked. 6, community enters. 7, the meal is served. 8, the community is nourished. 9, which is both the entry and exit point of this, is feeding the community.
Of this process of getting things done in the kitchen.
Here is the outward steps of the process. They go around in a circle like this. The moving lines say, okay, you're sitting in the kitchen and you need to know what you're going to do. You look down here to 4 and you go, okay, I'm going to be preparing these foods. So you pull out what you need from the drawers. You pull out the saucepan and a cutting board and 3 knives and 2 frying pans and a baking pan, because that's what you're going to need. And you know that by looking down here going, I need to prepare these things. 2, the kitchen at work. That's the pulling out process. 1, let me clarify. 1 is where the kitchen is sitting there. It's a preparation point. The kitchen is ready for work. Everything is in its place. 2, everything is being pulled out. 2 also looks down to 4, and it looks over to 8. 2, when it's looking to 4, knows what it needs to be pulling out. When it looks to 8, it knows its purpose, which is feeding the community. So it knows at 8, when you're looking at 2, when you're looking at it, you know that the food has to be good, and you need the right tools to cook it to make it good. 3, the food enters. This is what we call the first shock. And I'm going through this really quick because you guys should all know it by now. The first shock, the food enters. The food comes in from another process. If it's the wrong food, the process breaks down and stops. If no food enters, there is no meal. If the wrong food enters, there is no meal. You get a meal when the right food enters. This means that 2, you're on the phone to your supplier going, I need this, this, and this, and not that and the other thing. Food enters. 4, you prepare the food. You're cutting, you're slicing, you're peeling, you're doing all of this stuff. Here is the hidden point between 4 and 5. This is the equator. This is the line. Once you cross it, you can never go back. And that happens here at 5 when you start cooking the food. When you cook food, you cannot uncook it. Irreversible changes begin to happen. So food cooks here. 6, the community enters. That's your second shock. Without the community to eat the food, there is no meal. All you have is piles of stuff on plates and bowls. It is the community that makes the meal, and it comes in from a different Enneagram as well. 7, the meal was served. If it's served correctly, if it looks beautiful, if it smells beautiful, if it's laid out correctly, everybody wants to eat it. And 8, the community eats the food, they're happy. But 7 goes back to 1. The kitchen goes back to ready to work. And that means the servers are in there scrubbing the pots and pans while the community is eating. That's incredibly quick. And hopefully you were able to follow that.
9.
9 is both the entering and the exiting shock. That means that at 9, the community is fed. Nourishment has been provided. At 0, it's the idea of nourishment being provided that starts you to 1. Make sense? Sort of, maybe?
Paylon's not a yes. Zilha's not a yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, the Pythagoreans used this symbol to plot pretty much every process that they had to go through. You need to build a house. They're going to put that on the Tetractys. You need to sail across the ocean to get something or do something. They're going to put that on it. And what they're looking for is the places where the process can bog down, which we call shock points. This also is demonstrated by the octave. We have the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. Mathematically, between do and re is a whole step. Between re and mi is a whole step. Between mi and fa is a half step. The vibration retards, and you need extra energy to get it across that half step to the C, or to the la.
There you go.
Yeah, sorry. And then to the C, and at the C, there's another retardation between the C and the octave do is only a half step. So again, you have to add energy to it, which is why when Kyle sings the entire octave except for the last note,
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si.
and we hang there and you feel that wanting to push it through. That's what represents that. Hit the last note, please.
Do.
Thank you.
And if you look at it on a piano, I think this is a good visual. If you're familiar with piano keys and you're doing a
Key of C.
A C through C scale, then you see that there are white keys and black keys. And when you're switching between, which one, fa and la, you're going, there's no black key between them. You're going straight from one white key to another
the
white
mi,
key.
fa, and the si, do. Yeah.
Yep.
And those represent the half steps.
Yep.
And Dave says you should play the almost complete octave of singing to someone for a whole day and see what happens. Dave, are you volunteering?
Sure, says Dave. All right. Coming up with new tortures.
Yep.
That's Dave, very crafty.
So the secret history of the Enneagram is the secret that it goes way back a lot further than most people understand that it does.
I just want to correct.
Yeah.
It's like Fa, sol, light, right? Not
Do,
fa,
re, mi.
fa, sol.
No. Mi, fa is the half step.
Okay, yeah.
Do, re, mi, fa.
Yep.
Sol, la, si, and then do.
Yeah.
Si, do is the second half step. Mi, fa, and si, do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry about that. I'm getting myself confused.
Yeah, and you can hear it in the notes themselves.
Yeah. Do you want me to do it again?
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la.
Yeah, you hear that mi, fa, sol. Yeah.
Do, re, mi, fa.
Yeah.
Do, re, mi, fa, sol. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do.
So you hear how that works. Can you hear the half steps in there? What do you think, Nancy?
I don't really hear them.
Okay, well, you would probably need to have a keyboard in front of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The visual
Yeah.
helps at first because you have to have a bit of a trained ear for this.
Yeah.
So, no matter.
So, no matter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Pythagoras was into two things: mathematics, because he felt that the universe was at its base mathematical. That was actually one of their axioms. And music, because he felt that music was one of the most perfect expressions of mathematics. And this is why we have the scales that we do now. I mean, he did a lot of work on that. And the first scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do, is one of 7 scales. Or not scales, modes of singing. Modes, not scales, excuse me. And that's a topic for another time too, because we'd be here all night talking about that stuff. Okay, the floor is open for questions. The floor is always open for questions, but let's see what you guys think. Have I made any sense at all? Because I'm trying to cram like probably a 12-hour lecture into 1 hour. So, talk to me.
I have a question.
Good, lay it on me.
I want to know if you think that the Enneagram that we see in the background that we know as the modern Enneagram originated with Gurdjieff, or if he got it somewhere else earlier.
I think that it is most likely that it either originated with Gurdjieff or the person who taught him this system. I think that it cannot go back further than 1 generation from him, because there would probably be some evidence somewhere. So we don't know for sure.
Yeah. But that's your feeling, since you haven't really seen it.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. I mean, and the only person who's ever talked about finding it elsewhere was Gurdjieff, right? Back in the early days, being led to the World Brotherhood and all of that sort of thing.
And unfortunately, we cannot necessarily ask him now. So.
Oh, I ask him all the time. He just doesn't answer.
Yeah.
Because he's dead.
So, good question, Dave.
Yeah. So my best guess is that either he or the person who taught him created this symbol as an easier way to understand and a more modern expression of this process of figuring things out. But the history of it goes way the heck back. And it has influenced a number of different people over time, not the least of which was the Blessed Raymond Lull. Who here knows who the Blessed Raymond Lull was? No Catholics in the group?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. Raymond Lull was born in Majorca, which is now part of Spain, I think, in the 12th century, I'm pretty sure. He was a troubadour and a noble. Being a troubadour means that he spent a lot of time probably up in Occitania. I think Majorca is actually part of Occitania. Don't hold me to that. And he spoke fluent Arabic and Chaldean. He learned Arabic and Chaldean specifically, according to his biographers, so that he could convert the Moor to Christianity. But I'm not so sure that it was exactly that. He wrote, as far as I know, the first book on chivalry in the West. There are lots of books in the East already on chivalry, in Persia, in Iran, and in the Arab countries of the Gulf. All you have to do is, in Arabic, you look up the term fatah or fatwa, not fatwa, but it means a noble youth. And in Persian, Zoha or Zainab, correct my pronunciation. I believe it is Javammard, the act of being noble and good. Zoha, did I do it right?
Yeah, you did. You did very well.
Thank you.
Javon Matt.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Zoha, if your phone dies, that's all right. Thank you for letting us know.
Yep.
So, chivalry.
So, chivalry.
Raymond
Lowell. But he had this around the age of 36 or 37, I think, he had this mystical experience up on some mountain, and he spent the rest of his life writing stuff down, trying to create this holistic idea of man, the universe, and God. And it is pretty obvious that
We just got a message from someone. I'm not sure
okay,
what it said.
let us find out. Message from Zainab. Zainab needs to leave to pick up the kids.
Okay, no worries.
Take care, Zainab. Yes,
Glad
we're
you
running
made it.
over.
Yep.
So one last little thing, and then I will shut up about this. This is one of Raymond Lull's ways of looking at the connection of the divine to the mundane. And we see here 9 categories connected up in interesting ways with a hidden 10th in the center. And this sort of thing goes through all of his work. He considers these things around here to be important attributes of God.
So goodness, greatness, duration, power, wisdom, will, virtue, truth, glory.
Yep.
And then underneath those are the noun versions, and then we have the adjective versions: good, great, durable, powerful, wise, willing, virtuous, true, glorious.
Yes.
Yep.
So we have those. And he uses that lettering system to compute all sorts of crazy stuff. He's worth studying if you have a lot of time. All right, so questions. Give us questions. Give us answers, or we will have to go away and be sad because we didn't have any questions or answers.
Elmar, what are your thoughts? You've been quiet.
Yeah, and I guess I'm going to remain quiet. I mean, this is all kind of interesting to me, but it doesn't really excite me so far. So I'm just going to listen.
All right, Omar.
Fair enough.
Paylan, what are you thinking about? She says she's about, okay, that's fine. Good night, Paylan.
Take care.
How you doing, Nancy?
I'm doing okay. A little tired, but
Yeah, I
I
think
wanted
it's
to
time to
hear
wrap
about-
this up. But if you have a last question, go for it.
well, when you first put the Tetrarchus up, I was thinking about how it could be constructed, and it seemed like one way of doing it would be have one point, and then you build a hexagon around it, and then you add in the 3 corners, and that would give it to you. And I don't know if that means anything. I was wondering how important the center point was.
The center point is actually very important in this. So yeah, draw that out. See if it works for you.
Mhm.
Mysterious iPhone person, do you have any questions?
Well, they can always let us know in comments on the group or on the video.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Any other last thoughts?
This is an obscure one, but I appreciate you all listening in, and hopefully you found something useful here, and you got the secret history.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, these things are not new. These are a part of human history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I want you in closing to notice that I never mentioned personality as part of the Tetractys even once.
I take it that was not a thing.
That was not a thing. That had never been a thing until the 1960s. And we've talked about how that came about. We don't need to go into that, but there you have it. So with no further ado, I'm going to end the recording and say thank you all and good night.
Thanks, everyone.